All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Offscript, first of all. And really excited to have Sebastian. And, I'd like to give a little introduction to Seb. So we've known each other for quite a while now, right, Seb? We met at Founders Institute. And I've always been fascinated with your journey, right? You started the way you've begun your career. So a little bit of introduction, perhaps it's better when it comes from you, but I'll give my perspective, right? So you've been an entrepreneur since early life. You've worked and done things for great companies, small and big. One of the some of the most notable companies you've been at is includes Porsche. You've led Porsche Digital uh, at one point. You've been very close to Volkswagen, and then you've been an entrepreneur yourself again. So you've been at the highest realms of corporate, and then you've come back down to starting from scratch, building a business, Field 33, and then going back again somewhere in between. So what fascinated me about you is that you've always had a very sharp mind. So that's something that I've seen, which is not that common, I have to say, because you're always able to see things in the future very fast, and I always like that. So is that an accurate description of your career, or how you see yourself, or what would you have to say when you look back a little bit on your career path?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jess. And first of all, thank you for having me. Very kind. I do like to see it a little differently. I did obviously have the opportunity a lot of times to learn different types of setups and also make something out of it. A lot of things I've done were actually quite successful. I do, however, make mistakes and I have failed a lot. And that's actually one of the things I'm actually grateful for because when you make a plan and things work out, that's great. It looks great and usually it makes money and you leave something behind. But when things fail, you actually learn, right? If you actually fail, if something didn't work, that's that's when you really learn and when you can then advance to the next step. And yeah, it's true. It's actually this year 30 years ago that I built my first online shop. This obviously in the mid 90s was early internet,
Yeah.
more CGI script based, basically taking fax based order processes onto websites. But this is actually something I did early while still at school, starting studies to make money because I needed money because I moved out from home before my A levels, and so I needed the money. I was young and needed the money, and I was fortunate enough to have played around with computers a lot of my childhood and early teenage time. And so I had the opportunity in the Web 1.0 time to get my hands dirty to understand the value of technology and what it can do to businesses. And that's basically what I've been doing ever since, being on the intersection of business and technology and working with people on both sides and creating solutions, creating organizations, creating value. That's basically what I do. Right. I've done this on the services side most of the time, but I've been on the corporate side, sometimes as a venture partner in the case of Mercedes-Benz, where we've built Mercedes-Benz IO. I was fortunate enough to be part of a team on both sides that decided to take a little bit of a different approach to digital transformation. Usually, at least at the time in the 2010 century, corporates and specifically automotive organizations would usually rely on suppliers. You have an idea, you find someone who has the knowledge, and then they build it for you. But digital products and the ability to generate digital value creation, revenue, was something that they considered strategic. So they were looking for a way to learn how to run digital product organizations, knowing that this is something that is very unfamiliar to their DNA. And so this is what we did. We created a joint setup in which we worked like a startup, but at the core of a corporate. And a bit more than 2 years later, they decided to like the way not just the idea looked, but also like it performed. And they actually acquired the company, and today Mercedes-Benz IO
What
is
year was this, Seb? I remember this story, but what year was this again?
15, 16, 17.
All right, yeah.
We started analyzing digital products websites, performance, customer feedback. And this was when we saw a lot of advancement in the big tech space. Like, oh, wow, look, this is Instagram. This is how it works. And the automotive companies at the time were trying to, be part of that game.
Yeah.
But hiring an agency and building something for you is usually a one-off. But you need to actually understand the customer problem, create a digital solution for it, and then keep advancing it. And this was something at the time that was not very familiar to them. And so this is we were at the right time at the right spot. And so this was one of the opportunities. I wasn't part of a corporate, but I built a company that then was used and then later acquired by a corporate. And that was very, very interesting also to see how the different types of mindsets that you bring together there actually work together and where they do not work together so well, right? And I mean, this company building approach is also a way of dealing with the issues of digital transformation. For me, digital transformation is, in a nutshell, creating the ability to generate value from software and data. And there are native companies that have been doing this all the time, and then there are
Mhm.
more classical organizations and typical corporates that still struggle to do so because it's a question of mindset. It's a different material. You don't work with products with suppliers in that sense. You work with software and data, which is different, right? And so you need to adopt to this. And what we did for Mercedes at the time was basically cheating because we didn't transform them. We just built a separate capability that we then injected once it was stable enough and we basically replaced or actually filled a void that was there before. But that's something that I look back, and there was lots of things that we failed at, but in the end, we speeded up the process in which digital products came to life. So time to market, time to value is drastically improved from multiple years to a few weeks or months. And you could also see that at the time in the adoption rate of products. Now, obviously, overall, everywhere the maturity in digital increased during that time a lot.
Sure.
So we also benefited from that. But that was actually a great learning because technology and organization and the way you make use of it in a large corporate, in this case, came together, and that made an awful lot of sense. I moved to Porsche after that in a VP role. I didn't run Porsche Digital, but I was in charge of the ecosystem around e-commerce
Yeah,
there.
sure.
And this is, for instance, one of the things where I would say we achieved a lot. But in the end, if you look at the stock price of Porsche today,
Well,
we didn't succeed in creating the type of digital capability that you would like to see there. Porsche vehicles today are not loved. We're getting there. I think they're doing a great job right now. I think they are now just announced a new R&D facility outside of Europe. They're focusing highly on software and on digital, but still today, if you ask someone on the streets, what do you love about a Porsche, it's usually the sound and the speed and
yeah.
everything that comes with a combustion engine. So we weren't really that successful in
Well,
establishing this
what I
capability,
wanted
but
to what I wanted to say is, since you've left Porsche and the other companies, things have been a bit shaky over there. So
no, that's not on my watch. I'm sorry. I can.
Right.
No, no, no,
Okay,
no.
no,
I've
I
never,
understand what you
to
mean.
be honest, Jasmine, I mean, I appreciate our time at the Founders Institute, but I've never worked with so many so smart people as at Porsche.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really interesting and really also a time full of learning and full of understanding what works well and what doesn't work well and why. And it was a crazy time. I mean, that was around the time when Volkswagen decided to create a central software unit to invest heavily in software capabilities. And it seemed at the time like the right approach. It's always interesting when industries change drastically to be part of that change and to learn from it and to ideally have a positive impact. So yeah, but I came to realize that a typical corporate setup is maybe not my preferred turf. I did run a deep tech startup as a CEO for 4 years after that, all the way until the VC money game changed significantly in 2023, and we ran
Yeah.
out of money. The only regret I have is that it happened too late. We should have failed faster and
Mm,
spent more money earlier, and came to the conclusion that we either need to pivot or leave the idea behind. But on the other hand, if I look at it today, if we had the Field 33 team available today and the code running in the cloud as we had 4 years ago, we would be in a really, really good position with the advancement that we've seen in AI and specifically generative AI since. But there you go. Sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's
Timing, yeah.
the business model. It always depends. Right? Yeah, and today, and I think that's one of the reasons why you invited me, I'm the CEO of Y1. We are the partner for premium brands and manufacturers to generate digital experiences. We started in content management, e-commerce, product information management, and we've acquired a set of agencies into a group that today is a premium partner for brands and retailers. And we build digital marketing solutions, very often still based on the mentioned components, but it's more and more creating a seamless customer journey and a product experience that actually differs and differentiates yourself from, let's say, the standard digital environment in which Mm, yeah, customer. I mean, today, you look at product, you click away the cookie banner, and then you see very often the very similar setup. So differentiating there in terms of a manufacturer brand, and also differentiating there in terms of a retailer brand, and actually capturing customers is very difficult, specifically when it comes to complex customer journeys, when it comes to complex product data models, and this is where we are where we're today strong at, and what we're planning to extend significantly.
Yeah, fascinating, right? So, when you were saying this again, obviously, I remember at least most of it from all our conversations. But what's interesting is you have been in very different kind of companies. But what I see as a common thread is you thrive in an environment where the challenge is complex and you want to simplify things and get it done. I feel like that's a common thread because you were at these large corporates and then you were at a startup and then now at Y1, which is I label it as somewhere in between because it has great growth potential, but it's not as big as Volkswagen or Porsche, for example, right? But I mean, you've always I think you've championed at simplifying complicated things. One of my questions here is maybe first you mentioned you fail a lot, right? So what is one biggest key lesson that you've learned from any of these failures that you've been through? Like we can talk about the startup that you've been as well. If there's something that has really stuck with you, from those learnings and that you try to apply it today, that's one. And the second thing I'd go for is how do you recognize a players when you're building a team early on, right? Even before the 3 months that they have you spotted some traits of a player? So these are two questions that I'd love to.
Yeah, the first one is very difficult, so let me start with the second one. I mean, A players, I'm this generation where we say hire for attitude, train for skill, and that worked well for me for most of my career. What I do like in early conversations with people, I usually meet someone, and within the first couple of minutes, I get a picture, which then I try to complete. And obviously, you always try to, go deeper and ask questions. But very often, my first intuition isn't wrong. And what usually catches my attention is curiosity and impatience, because that's what you need most when it comes to working in the space that I'm in. You need to be able to adapt quickly, which means you need to understand, analyze, learn, and then realize what works and what doesn't work. And so curiosity and impatience is really, really, really helpful, right? And I mean, A players. I'm not even sure whether I'm an A player. But people that can provide an A performance over longer periods of times in my environment typically have a high level of curiosity, a certain amount of impatience, and then it totally depends. I mean, if it's about engineering, it's fine when certain communication or persuasion skills are not so so highly exposed, whereas in people in sales or in generating business models is a
Sure.
completely different capability. But overall, I would say it's curiosity and a certain level of impatience, and then the willingness to to go into discourse with people. I really, and a lot of people know that I tend to disagree, not because I disagree, but because I believe that alternative perspectives are something that are a good starting point to then together figure out what's the best approach. And if you if you say, yeah, that's a great idea, we'll just go like that, you typically don't improve at the speed as when somebody says, hold on, I don't like this, or I have a better idea, or how about this? And, you need to be able to look at different perspectives, see pros and cons, look at the dimensions which are important, like feasibility versus ability to monetize versus how would the people feel about this? Not just the customers, but also the employees that need to build it. And so I believe that having a critical argument about an idea or an approach is really important. And I've met a few times people that are put off by the typical American approach is, oh yeah, it's all great and let's go, and positive feedback, which is very often very helpful. But when it comes to deciding on directions, when it comes to correcting products and their positioning, it's really good if you have a very critical perspective. But then later on are able to agree or to find a good compromise if that's a feasible option, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Your other question in terms of failure, I mean, so I was in digital transformation, at least at the time it was called that, for about 15 years, and actually built a strategy consultancy today, over 40 million euros of revenue that targeted exactly that. So explain to the boomer management level how the digital economy works, and then not just explain it, but actually create operationable or executable strategies to build digital channels for marketing, for sales, for customer service. This is what I did for a long period of time. And we've all heard this, we need to break down the walls of the silos, right? Um,
Correct.
and as I said, at Mercedes, we didn't, but we built a new, bigger silo, and we handed out invitations to people to join in. So you didn't break anything down, and we also picked a space where there was more of a void than an already established set that you had to change. And I think I'm not sure whether I got it wrong, but a really important learning for me is that the so-called silo in the corporate is today by far the most successful organizational principle, right? Because you divide work, you put people in charge of parts of that work. And now, obviously, this doesn't always work, but even in companies like Apple or Google, this has become the predominant way of organizing on a top level. If you look at the org chart, this is what you see and what you find. And now there are different ways of dealing with this, and you can still communicate more. You can create cross-functional teams. You can do all that. But I was for a long time using very alternative organizational approaches, including things like holacracy, which I totally believe in and I totally appreciate, but I don't think you have to force this onto every type of organization to be successful in business or to be successful in digital. And by the way, successful in digital means nothing. I mean, in the end, it's always about the business. So it's not for the sake of digitalization. It's not for the sake of a different organizational principle. It's in the end shareholder value, enterprise value that you're trying to impact. And you can do that without tearing down all the walls.
That's interesting. I mean, I mean, this is something that I'd love to dive deeper into. And in between, you mentioned boomer generation, for example, right? I mean, so where I'm getting that here is, one point is leaders know how to create a nice team, right? So it's outward looking. How often do you see that leaders are not inward looking? Because, for example, if they are stuck in a certain technology era, and then here comes AI, which is making things extremely fast, and now they're like, okay, are we going to change? You have your mid management, for example, saying, yeah, it's time for change because look what these guys are doing. And this often becomes an inertia where the senior leaders are not willing to change fast, and they're just taking their time to understand the technology. And you've seen this in organizations of different sizes. What do you think is the best way to go to an organization who, where, let's say, your gatekeeper is like, yeah, we want to make this change, but I have these partners, or I have these senior managers, it's really hard to convince them, but at the same time they know something needs to happen. How do you address that?
So I like to think in standard structures that I reuse, right? And when you talk about such a setup, I see the dimension of the business model, and you can easily also communicate about this using a business model canvas. It's very simple. You do some
Oh,
certain things, you have certain assets, and you generate a value proposition, and you transport it via a couple of channels, and you have certain types of customer relations. In the end, that's very simple. Sometimes it's a linear business model, sometimes it's a platform approach. Then you have two sides, but basically you have a business model. Then you have, in the space that we are active in, you have technology, and usually it's not technology that's 20 years old. Usually it's something that's been invented, and it's pretty new. And then you have people. And people, I mean, mostly employees, partners, people helping you to make the business model actually work. And those three dimensions, they all need different points of view. They need different considerations. They also need different types of leaders and people. Usually, people, organizations that are successful at dealing with these three dimensions when it comes to digitally enabling a business or creating value from software and data, then it's a management team where you have a complementary setup where people are good at understanding the business model, figuring out the financials, creating focus and strategy. You have people that are able to orchestrate technology, understand make or buy. What is strategic for us? What do we need to do ourselves? What can we rely on partners for? How much can we afford to do that? That's, by the way, one of the big issues I currently see in the AI hype. I mean, I don't know how many companies are currently inventing how to build a chatbot. Nobody needs to invent that. It's all there. You can just use off-the-shelf products. You should
mhm.
you should rather look at your business model and find use cases that you can optimize, automate, and very often in the AI space, those are use cases that in the past you didn't even see or you didn't even consider automating. And this is something that an organization should look after. But make or buy is a very important thing. And then people, I mean, more and more we see the boomers are currently leaving, but we see millennials all the way down to young, not even 20-year-olds that try to mingle together in the tech space. If you look at the age distribution at companies like OpenAI, is mind-boggling. I mean, you have
Mhm.
30, 40 years of
Yeah.
age difference between the people. And that means you need to understand your organization. You need to look after culture. It's a very old thing, but you need to look after that, and you need to give people space. You need to enable them, and this is the challenge. It's usually not a technology topic. It's usually not a price of token topic. It's usually not go to market problem, but it's that combination of orchestrating that properly.
Got it, understood. So, um, why not take a small example, right? So let's say there's a senior manager, senior leader in a decision making role listening to this podcast, and they're like, okay, we got
Yeah,
to do something with, yeah, I mean, no, you're the other side of the table. We're talking about the other side, meaning managers who are in a rather traditional firm, but they know that they need to do something, otherwise they're going to get left behind. What would you recommend would be the first couple of steps for them? Because they might not understand what regression models are, what machine learning models are, the difference between ML models, LLMs, and then you have MCP, all kinds of terms, fancy terms coming, and then they're looking at multi-billion, trillion-dollar deals happening, and they're like, we got to do something. What would you tell them? Where do
very
you start
very
from?
simple. There's one answer. Understand your why. I've seen in the last 12 months, I've seen so many managers in the situation that you described that say,
Yeah,
we need to do something about AI. We need to do this. We need to do that.
correct.
Can we want something with LLMs. I said, why? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Right? And very often, and this is also uh, partly true regards what towards what I just said, it's the incentive models, right? I mean, companies where silos are an issue, it's usually not the silo, it's usually the incentive model, how incentives are being shared or not shared and distributed, who's got which objective to follow. And if you know what you're trying to achieve, I want to reduce churn, or I want to reduce cost for customer service. This is a clear purpose. You get a why for that. And then you talk to someone who's an expert from a business point of view for these types of processes and for these problems. And then you bring someone to the table that has a new technology angle to it. And then you conceptualize and you design a solution. And then sometimes maybe a large language model will be involved. That's very true. But bad news, very often, a piece of automation or just some clarity
Correct.
somewhere is already enough. And we meet managers in this situation that do not have the task to actually fix a purpose or a why. They have the task to do something with an LLM, and that's very difficult
Yeah.
because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I have obviously 10 more things, but it seems like we have a question from the community we can go for. You can read it also, Sebastian, right? When it
When it
comes to
comes to
AI.
AI, do you think it will strengthen the big players or make them more vulnerable to someone who knows how to leverage AI better, even if it requires a lot of capital? So again, I guess it comes back, Francisco, I think. Thank you for that question. I think it comes back to what I just said. So, I mean, shareholder value typically is created by running your business more efficiently or growing it faster than your competition, right? And if AI can help you do that, and if large language models, so generative AI helps you do that, then it's great. Then you should start learning how these things work, finding partners that can help you do that, and then establish a first set of solutions, learn from the impact of those solutions by measuring the impact and then improving the impact over time. And this is not a question of billions in terms of investment. The stories that we read in the media about OpenAI and Oracle and NVIDIA, this is something that for 99% of the economy will not be relevant. For you is relevant what capabilities are out there, what's the understanding and the tech set that I'm dealing with in my organization, and how can I create adoption towards something that creates value for me. And it's always important to first take the value perspective and then say, how can AI help in that? Right. And it's in many cases not going to be an LLM setup that you build yourself. It's just not the case.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I've come across people recently who are saying we are considering building our own LLM. I'm like, dude, I mean, you're wasting your time. You've already lost that race. There's no need of doing that right now. I mean, this is also a very interesting topic. Right? The amount of capital that's being spent is also a worry for the same guys like OpenAI, and they've clearly mentioned they at this point have not still found a way to make to deploy AI in a way which is clear is going to make them the money needed to make the returns, and that's one of the reasons they've done the following, which is hiring 100 investment bankers and trying to build a very specific financial model. I mean, finance is we are in that space, so we understand why that's the case. But before we go into that's a topic on the agenda. I just want to continue, come back to the interesting thing you mentioned. So always start with the why, right? So that's like, Simon Sinek says that as well. Start with the why. Understood. Let's say the leader listening is like, I've cracked my why. I know exactly this is what I want to do. What's the next step? Would you recommend, or rather, have you seen leaders building their own teams, hiring people, work faster, or is it just let's just find a Y1's advisory, for example, or Panama's because these guys know what they're doing, or is it a mix of two? What have you seen working best?
Yeah. So let's be careful here, Jasvir. The way you ask the question assumes that I've been helping corporates for the last 15 years in adopting generative AI. Let me break the news. I haven't. I mean, I was, so I did have the pleasure of integrating Luminous. That's the LLM built by Aleph Alpha, one of our
Right.
European AI
Yeah.
players in early 2022. 2021, 2022. This is when we started the cooperation between Field 33 and them. And this is where I actually really learned what a transformer and a large language model is. And we've tried to do that in the public space. We've tried to do that into our product. And I do have some experience, but I wouldn't say I'm the person to talk to about, I know my why and now how do I apply AI. What I do have experience in is identifying a business problem or opportunity and then finding a technology solution for that and growing it over time to have an impact on your business. And as I said, sometimes and more, generative AI and specifically agent technologies, by the way, which doesn't have a lot to do with large language models. It's something separate, right? Having multi-agent setups, being able to use standards like MCP. This is something that was created on the side. This is very relevant and very interesting. And obviously, you can always suggest, be curious, expose your people to this type of technology, let them play with it. But in the end, how many customers or companies do we know that have actually created a measurable impact that you can see on the balance sheet? It's not very many. And I would assume the listeners to this podcast and probably 99% of us, what happens at NVIDIA, what happens at OpenAI is not us. This is a different game. This is evaluations which are difficult to understand. I don't. This is money being pushed around between a few players, and I don't think this is too interesting for a normal company trying to keep up with the pace. So understanding the why, identifying the components of the problem or the opportunity, and then finding solutions for those components. Very simple. Systems engineering is how it works. And then putting together those solutions. And for each of the solutions, decide, this is something we do and we need to learn. And can we do it by ourselves? Or do we need someone to help us learn? And is this something that we give to someone who has the experience and we just plug that part of the solution in? That's very important. Understand your why, then go for make or buy and accept the fact that it's going to be a journey, right? It's not it's not something where you say this is the top of the mountain where I want to go to, and guys tell me how much money it's going to take and by when you will be done. This is not how it works. You say this is the direction I want to go. I would like to see the sunset in the morning. Let's start together, go for a base camp, make a plan from there, look at the weather. And ideally, you want to progress and you don't want to deviate too much. But learning over time is really, really important.
Yeah, no, there's another question. If you had to hire from Festus, hire someone today for an AI first company, what traits matter more than degrees or experience?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Coming back to what I said, I mean, obviously, in an AI first company, and when it comes to technologists, you do need a certain amount of education. AI and specifically higher levels of machine learning and generative AI is something that you can only master if you understand machine learning, statistics. Math is a big, big topic,
Mm.
but in the end, it's also the curiosity and the impatience that you deal with new things. I mean, what we've seen in the last 24 months in that space keeps changing all the time. Products we built internally at Y1 that we started using became unstable and are not used anymore because the technology behind has changed so much in the last couple of months that it's very, very difficult to keep up. So it remains based, after the basic capability set that you will typically look for. It's the curiosity and the impatience and the flexibility to also change. This is what I would look for.
Interesting. Yeah, on the same point, and then I think I want to move on to the importance of data in doing all this. The final question on this topic is, to give you an example, recently we were reached out by one of the largest private debt funds out there, especially in Europe, and they said, "Look, we are very well." And this was a mid management gatekeeper. That's why I use that example. And he was like, "We got to do something about this." Similar conversation, and we are very inefficient. So they had understood their why very well. So I validated that. So that was good. But then he was like, I understand the value, but I got to convince our senior managers. And that's so. One final question here is, if you have such senior managers, would you recommend them spending some time vibe coding, or asking them to use more chat gpt or perplexity, or would you be like, yeah, just let's just build a small pilot, get the budget, and show the actual result to them, without, because you can't really control what these guys learn, right? But I think if they're listening, it's probably worth
Mm.
suggesting.
Yeah. So first of all, all of the things that you suggest is something I do almost every day, and I
Yeah.
don't believe it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't create a daily or a weekly impact, right?
Yeah.
So I read newsletters, I try things out, I download tools, I have an environment in which I can do things which doesn't hurt any of our typical compliance and customer areas. I have actually a separate machine on which I just play around and I reset it every once in a while because I don't know what some AI browser or something has put on. I just try things out and I see how it works. And I know I'm in a very fortunate position. It's part of my job, so I get to do this, or I actually take the free time at night. But I get to do this, and not everybody is in the position to do that. Which is why, for instance, at Y1 we have created what we call an AI roundtable. Just every 2 weeks for
Mm.
half an hour, we get together and people share their experiences. Look, last 2 weeks I tested this out. This is what worked for me. This is what didn't work for me. And
Yeah.
and you can do this within your company. There are many, 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 many forums that have come to life in the last couple of months, which are more public, where you can do this. You can do this on Discord. You can do this on Reddit. You can talk to your friends about it. And this has become more important than in the past because technology has started to move is moving even faster. It remains an exponential development. Moore's law is by far outpaced. It keeps getting more and more and more and more and more and more. And you need to find alternative strategies how to deal with this. Now, regarding the specific question, we had a similar case. We had a customer, or we have a customer actually, and they made a very interesting statement. It's about marketing and marketing efficiency, and they said the amount of parameters and signals that we need to consider to optimize the customer journey and thus improve customer lifetime value is developing exponentially, and we have crossed a threshold where we can't do it anymore without AI. And the implicit assumption was we mean generative AI because that was at the time, or still is, the big topic. And we
Mm.
came to realize it's a lot of things, but it's not generative AI. It's a huge machine learning problem that can be solved based on a model and an algorithm that was invented decades ago. It's, by the way, the similar way that Amazon also does it, right? And in the end, there will be machine learning models involved because it's a wonderful language interface to
Yeah.
intelligence. But the actual algorithm that tells you which marketing euro to inject where for which revenue that you generate in which channel is not a generative AI problem. It's a pure machine learning, multi-dimensional, actually non-linear optimization.
Yeah. No, I
Which
mean,
which
absolutely.
which LLMs are absolutely the wrong tool for, because this is
Well,
one of the
yeah.
things they can't do at all. Some of them pretend to be able to do that, but they can't.
No, no, I fully agree. I think very few people realize the amount of machine learning that has been used in. I mean, I know more about finance, but let's say in fraud detection, in especially the neobanks. I mean, it's been very heavily used since decades. LLMs have been very useful on different fronts. But coming back, it's interesting you mentioned you do bi-weekly. We do a weekly AI roundup, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're obviously a much bigger company, so still bi-weekly is
Yeah,
still
you are
pretty nice.
rich. We can't afford it weekly. We
Ah,
also
yeah,
have
of
to
course.
train people in other trades. So we also have academy, but we do academy one
Yeah.
week and a roundtable the other week. So
Oh, that's
if you
nice,
want,
Academy.
we discussed this earlier. If you want, I can share a little visualization
That
on
yeah,
how we see the difference between machine learning and generative AI, or actually how it evolved over time.
this is a great
Um,
time. This is a great time for that.
this is this is what I do. I create structure and I help people understand. And today what we do in terms of optimizing based on computers, it came initially from symbolic. So we started to create expert models in the 80s. And we started. There's actually a team that's still active, SICK, that in the mid 80s started to describe everything about the world. So to create a world model by statically describing every true statement. And this is amazing, but uh, this is how most of the software solutions today work. You define a rule as a business rule, and it's a given statement, and it's symbols, it's semantics, it's ontologies. This is a basic that very often you still need, right? And over time, we developed statistics on steroids. Most of the machine learning tools still today are based on a linear regression, which is basically statistics on steroids. And it was, I think, in the 90s when Hinton defined deep learning, which is machines learn by themselves. Now, supervised learning is not a machine learning by itself. It's a human telling a machine what to learn. And then deep learning comes into play when we talk about unsupervised learning. So a machine that, and we create models for that to reduce noise in data or to create data sets that you can use to train and so forth and so. And then reinforcement learning is an even higher level of that. And you need those three: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning, and a couple of other small ingredients. But basically, this is what you need to turn from a large corpus of text something that becomes a language model. This is what happened in 2019, 2020, 2021. And it was only the conversational piece, the ability to have a continuous conversation, which is basically a trick by chaining the use of models that OpenAI published in late 2022, if I still get it right. I have a timeline down here, I think. Yeah, so
2022
GPT-3 was
was it?
available in
Yeah,
2020,
2022.
but the GPT-3 that we found that was issued in 2022 is not, it wasn't invented the night before. This was already available a long time before.
Yeah.
And what makes ChatGPT as an example so intriguing to use for us is the fact that we use multiple types of models chained and in a conversational setup, right? But it's the generative AI part works very different in terms of how we use the large language model than machine learning. And Garry Kasparov, the chess master at the time, was defeated. This is 28 years ago by Deep Blue, so an IBM computer and software that doesn't. That's basically based on symbolics, statistics, and huge compute power, right? And imagine, I mean, companies, all of the companies, all of the Fortune 500 optimizing their business model on a similar level like Deep Blue does chess. That would already be a huge
Yeah.
advancement. So there's huge potential for that. Right. Another milestone that I find really interesting is when AlphaGo defeated the Go champion, this Asian chessboard where you put the dots on. And it's if you want to look it up, it was move 37, where the machine
Became very
made a
famous.
move, made a move, and you can actually see on the video how Lee he has a smirk. He's like, okay, now I won, because that's a stupid move, right? You don't do that in Go. This can't be good. It's a machine, and it doesn't have the right types of instructions. And a few moves later, he realized it wasn't stupid. It was the move that made him lose the game. And this actually changed the way today the game is played on the streets. It's a completely new perspective towards how the game works. And that's why I like Move 37. This is what I believe is what we need as society, as human beings, using this intelligence to modify the way we think about things and advance the way we do it. Now, I don't know if you can make money by winning Go, but these types of advancements are what are really interesting and important. And this wasn't based on generative AI. This was a reinforcement learning setup that basically the machine played the game against itself a trillion times and learned from playing and came up with strategies that no human came to think of before. And this is a type of AI, mainly high-level machine learning, which is really, really, really relevant and can benefit many, many, many companies.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So you need somebody telling the leadership or the team who wants to deploy this that, hey guys, LLM is not necessarily your answer. You have all of these capabilities. And I think there is an imminent advantage for those who have actually built systems or those who have been involved with machine learning or unsupervised, supervised deep learning models. Like I had spent 7 months with Python, right, building all of these exercises and tools, build an in-house app, and that's when I got a click in my mind that, okay, this is what it can actually do. And I think that realization matters a lot. And I think, but what I see is AI advancing, the capability advancing at such high speeds is the capability that is being deployed today, is that even going to be relevant in a year? So what should organizations, what timeline should organizations now plan for? Is that something that you think about? Or, and that's also related to, so it's not just the compute capacity, or what you can pack in a single model. It's also, then you have the silo data problem which already exists. So do you see a bigger challenge in what AI model to use and having multimodal, or do you see, okay, let's just sort out the basics first, which is, let's just get data in a format which can be deployed, which can be used by the AI to make meaningful things? Where do you see a bigger, where do you see a trend in here, for example?
I always wanted to do that. A friend of mine, Scott Galloway, likes to say on
Hmm.
podcasts, the answer is yes. Um, Look, I don't think there is a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that spreadsheet has probably replaced most of the handwritten tables in organizations in the meantime. Will generative AI or any other type of AI remove the spreadsheet? I don't know. I really don't know, right? I wouldn't mind, um, but I really don't know. And I think it's both. I mean, you were asking about vibe coding, and obviously my coding capabilities and skills, or my trust in that, eroded over the years, and I haven't written code in a long time. But yeah, so I do use generative AI to understand projects that we do in machine learning, because I open R Studio, I generate a little bit of code in Claude, and I check in Python whether this, what I think could work, does actually
Hmm.
work. Right? This
Yeah.
is as a proof of concept, as an MVP. Sometimes you can just keep the code and say, I'll fix it here and there, and it's done. Sometimes you say, okay, this could work, and then you describe what you've done, and you talk to the engineering team, and then you let them properly build it, right? So
Yeah.
I don't believe that you take a piece of AI and you solve a problem with it. I think it's a set of capabilities that make us better as humans, right? So I use ChatGPT every day, but it's not part of our core value creation, if you will. I mean, as a service provider for digital solutions, we employ people to create solutions for customers, and they do use different disciplines and means of AI. But in the end, it's that business model. Yeah, it's more and more product, it's more and more automation. That's true, right? And some of that automation is also based on agents or on machine learning models or on generative AI capabilities. But it's not this one thing that replaces the one other that we had in the past. That's not the way you need to look at it. So have the capability, understand the opportunity, but always remember, again, coming back, your why, and focus on what you're trying to achieve. And ideally, I mean, this is the best advice probably you can give someone, is to leapfrog innovation. I mean, a lot of the AI things that happened in the last 24 months, surprise, surprise, didn't show any value. And then now you could say it's been a mistake, yeah, to invest, I don't know, 20 million in this capability. But you don't know, because just because you haven't had an impact on your balance sheet now
Correct.
doesn't mean that the team that has made those learnings, and they have failed, so they have learned a lot, right, won't be able to next year or later this year do something good based on the experience. And so I wouldn't want to advise to anyone how much R&D money you should be spending, how much you should expose people to. It totally depends on the company, it totally depends on the business model and in the industry. But I believe as humans, it's really, really relevant to understand this. I mean, basically, what we're currently seeing is like when the internet came in the early 90s, or for most, more in the end of the 90s. It's the same type of change. And maybe it won't be the burst of the bubble like with the new economy. Maybe it's going to be different. I don't know. And yeah, maybe we also don't know who's going to be pets.com and who's going to be Amazon and Google. I don't think we really know. Probably OpenAI at the time has a evaluation which won't go away tomorrow, but they're definitely going to lose some of the value
Mhm.
over time because it can't continue like this. So we don't know. But would you advise a company in 2001, sorry, to not invest in capabilities around internet technologies, understand how websites work, understand how email works? I don't know. But to what extent you learn yourself, to what extent you leverage partners for that, that's the job of management to figure out.
Yeah, correct. I think so. You have to be proactive, at least in learning and trying things out. But you can't say that, let's just wait. I think let's just wait is not a thing. But I'm gonna you mentioned agents in between. We haven't touched upon agents yet, right? I think the basics have been covered. Yeah, you have to be very clear on what the why is and so on. Many people don't understand agents, right? A simple chat box is often termed as a chat agent, but that's not really what agents mean. What do you see the impact? Where do you see agents are gonna come in, and where do they add the biggest value? Obviously, we understand this, but this is also for the listeners.
Mm. Yeah. So an agent can basically be translated into a piece of machine that deals with a task, right? And the beauty of agent-to-agent communication and protocols like MCP, they allow you to plug and play those agents. Some of you might remember Yahoo Pipes. That was the very early version of that, where you could define a couple of things, or if this then I think that's what they're called, right? If this then, where you define certain things that happen based on parameters and you plug them together, right? And an agent and multi-agent system can be considered similarly. So I need someone to ingest data from somewhere and do something with it, even if there's a human in the loop, but that can be organized as an agent. I need something to fetch data in real time for inference from a website. This can be done with another agent. And by distributing the work of what you try to do within a Gen AI system into individual agents, you can have components that you can replace and exchange over time, right? So if I want to use your capability and I already have some kind of Gen AI setup, I'll probably approach you and ask you, can you plug into my multi-agent setup? Do you support MCP? And this way, I can leverage your capability without having to learn it myself. I just outsource a part of what I do in my AI setup, and this makes it really relevant. And the fact that we have learned so much over the different types of APIs, starting with service-oriented architectures, SOAP, REST, and so on. All of this is now moved on to a level where you can plug and play intelligence, and this is really great. So I advise everyone to have teams or partners on their journey that understand this and can leverage this capability to learn in the different areas at different speeds. So you don't
Very
have to
well
throw
said.
away what you've built. You can take parts that didn't work and replace them with other parts. Or you can plug in a component by a supplier, and when it gets too expensive and you understand the mechanism, you can find a replacement.
And this, the last thing that you mentioned is where I was going for. Find a replacement. So the bottom line is, with these agents, right? You're basically claiming back time. There has to be some value for the organization. You either make money, save time, right? Time as money, whatever. Okay, so you'll be also taking away the jobs of certain people in your workforce. And there's a big conversation in the large firms happening right now. At least we've seen Amazon. Okay, maybe that's the biggest example, laying off so many people. But that's an active question which is asked to us, and there doesn't seem to be a very clear answer. So this is about how do you envision human skills uh, need to evolve so there's not a situation where so much automation happens that the current skill set of people is really not relevant to the company anymore, and they have to let go, or what really happens in that case. Because I was talking to a few senior partners in one of the big four recently, and that was the conversation. Okay, so Chaz, if we implement this, we are potentially looking at so many junior roles disappearing. How do you answer that? I'm like, okay, there was a time think that the industrial revolution happened, and jobs evolved. If you expect jobs to remain the same, then you're in the wrong place, right? Then you're going to be left behind. That's my opinion. So I think there's an evolution, and I think there's an opportunity for businesses to adapt, but I think it's inevitable that some jobs are simply going to disappear. This is what I think. Have you had conversations with senior management around this, and what has been the chat there?
So we do hear people say that jobs will not go away, but we will add AI to those jobs, and the jobs will change.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Sure.
the currently exchanged narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at the data, you could get the impression that this is wrong because Amazon is laying off people.
Correct.
A lot of the big techs are currently laying off people. But I really question the relevance of these setups and the numbers that we see compared to the rest of the economy. Remember when Twitter decided to let 10,000 people go about a year and a half ago? Microsoft did the same. This was purely driven by boards that wanted to see efficiency increases. So people just got rid of a set of, part of the payroll that didn't create a direct impact to the bottom line. And then we lost fewer people than we built up since the pandemic on top of the actual development that we saw before.
Right.
And Amazon is, I mean, how many companies in the world compare to Amazon?
Exactly. It could be an
It's
edge
so
case.
difficult. I mean, and to be honest, I'm not a financial expert, so I don't know about somebody like Morgan Stanley or so. But obviously, there are tasks that in the past were done by hand. I remember my first girlfriend. She was a architectural drawer, so she would draw architectural diagrams for architects. Um, she learned to do this by hand, but her first job was to actually do it in a CAD program. And so this job
Right.
drawing went away, but she learned how to do it digitally, and she create. I don't know. Then she started creating these models, and we do know people. Or there were people that would put spreadsheets on paper. Now they do it in Excel, and obviously we need to learn and adopt over time. But I think, except for a couple of things that maybe people don't want to do, that we can easily delegate to technology, it doesn't necessarily mean there are always exceptions, but that on a broad scale, we will start to, all have a cognitive surplus that we can't make use of because we are not needed at work anymore. I'm a tech optimist, and I refuse to believe so. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. In one way, I feel like, I'm trying to take I think you might relate to this as well. Trying to imagine life before ChatGPT, right? I feel that there's only more work. I'm like continuously disappointed that why is it taking 5 milliseconds more longer to answer? Can't it do it faster? Whereas when it came for the first time, I was just so mind blown that, oh wow, I was okay taking so much time. So I think humans are very good at adapting, and they're never really happy with the technology, right? Because they're like, yeah, okay, now I'm expecting that there's a standard which is set, and I feel like there's just more and more work. So I think with it's not necessarily that uh, you know it's always the case you're going to replace, but it's okay, with the same amount of people you could do more, and you might as well need more people to so I think there's a net increase in job that can be done if you really use AI sensibly. So of course, but the roles need to play, but this is something that organizations have to think about very actively for
Maybe this
sure.
is a topic for another conversation, Joseph.
Yeah, that's exactly. This is we also reaching the end. I have a few lighter questions, right? So, do you? I mean, I know you're a tech optimist. I'm an optimist as well. But do you think there is a situation where there might be a dystopian uh, scenario, or do you think maybe AI is going to be the one who's going to be saving humans from that, and humans are creating the dystopia themselves, and it's not really AI? So either AI is the savior or AI is the cause of it.
As I
Do you
said,
think
I'm an
about these
optimist.
things?
As I said, I'm an optimist, so I refuse the dystopian perspective. I mean, we can get it right, us, the tech providers. Regulation can get it right. The users can get it right. And the utopian version would be that we actually advance democracy based on AI. I mean, they're called trusted leaders, but I find they hallucinate more these days than
Yeah.
technology does. So why not start to delegate a couple of the really relevant social and political topics into a piece of, agentic software that can actually do a better job? Because, a national budget, for instance, is always a compromise. But why don't we use AI to optimize for it? Why don't we use tools to actually manage how parties that get elected or leaders that get elected fulfill their original promise? There are so many things we can do. I mean, don't forget every ChatGPT query that you post has access to everything we have ever documented. This is mind-boggling. There are so many great things that you can do. And I don't know, most of the time I hear people talking about will we lose jobs and is the EU Data Act bad or not so bad? There are so many opportunities. get started.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a whole different conversation to go into why or how fast can AI take adoption in European governments. But I think there's another question here. In an organization, staff who adopts and adapts to AI in the new reality are probably those who gets to keep their jobs. In your view, what additional skills or training do these have?
I mean, this goes into the direction of the saying, which I still believe is correct. A software developer will not be replaced by an AI, not in general, not always. But a software developer that knows his tools or her tools and can use the tools properly will definitely have a better chance to get the job. And will software developers be hired less? We still don't know. There's so much more software to be built, so much more problems to be solved. And if AI helps us to generate more output, that's great.
Appreciate that. I think we have one more from Francesco again. When it comes to Porsche and electric vehicles, what do you think about EVs? Oh, that's another podcast. Personally, I believe the future will remain hybrid until the inconvenience of long charging times. Okay, we can have a 2 hour conversation on this, but a short answer maybe.
I went to see my parents in the south of Spain last week.
Oh,
I drove in a battery electric vehicle all the way there and back to 2,200 kilometers. I bring my family, my kids, my dog, no problem whatsoever. The electric vehicles is the future, and Porsche is one of the leaders in that space, if you ask me, and they have really, really, really attractive products. Unfortunately, they're a bit expensive. Not everybody can afford them, but I'm very optimistic about that.
yeah, I really don't understand why the sales are down this year. But I mean, the Porsche brand is still strong, but I mean, the products are fantastic. I love Porsche. I mean, but anyway, like you said, this can go into another, hour very easily. But if there's one last message that you have to say, I had this question written down. If there's a business leader who's saying there's no rush to adopt AI, there's still time, what would you tell them?
Don't be late to the party, but don't drink too much.
That's a good one. That's a very good answer. I love that. Okay, Seb. Thank you so much for the time. This was really insightful. Like you said, it's going to go really fast. There was a question. Do we? 1 hour goes extremely fast. We could go further very easily, perhaps in the next one. But thanks again for the time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the audience. Thanks to the audience for the questions as well. Yeah, and I hope to see you at the next one sometime soon, and we continue rocking the AI world.
Jasvier, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. Also, thank you to your team in the background organizing. This
Yeah.
was great fun. Looking forward to speaking again in the future.
Wonderful. Let's do it. Thanks, Ed. Ciao, ciao.